Recently, loot boxes have been a major topic of discussion in the gaming industry. They've shown up in recent major releases such as Middle-earth: Shadow of War and also the upcoming Battlefront 2, the latter case of which being so clear-cut that many people are calling it a pay-to-win scheme. Needless to say, many gamers are frustrated and upset, so much so that they've started signing petitions demanding that their local governments take action. This particular petition, at the time of recording, has garnered roughly 14,000 signatures in the UK, demanding that their parliament recategorize loot boxes within video games as gambling, subjecting them to reasonable regulation under the law. Now, when I heard about this, I questioned it, asking if it was actually legitimate or if it was just a bunch of trolls signing something. But no, it's legit, and people are actually demanding that their governments start regulating their video games. And this video is entirely dedicated to showing and trying to explain why that's a terrible idea. Now, let me just start by saying I get the frustration. I do not like loot boxes or microtransactions in the slightest. I hate them. I think they're bad for the industry. I personally would never buy one or participate in a game that pushes these so blatantly as these recent examples such as Middle-earth: Shadow of War and Battlefront 2's multiplayer. But I believe that we have to respond to this intelligently and not have some sort of knee-jerk response to it where we demand that Big Brother get involved to stop it and fix all of our problems. Most of these issues can be solved, but they are not going to be solved in these hectic and irresponsible ways. And I'm going to try to explain why it's a bad idea to get the government involved in our hobby and in our favorite pastime. Now, first things first, this is a specific discussion with regards to loot boxes, not strictly microtransactions, but loot boxes being characterized as gambling under the law. Now, I'm going to speak on this in terms of United States law because that's what I'm familiar with living in Colorado here in the States, but this can also apply in many cases to other countries. So nonetheless, I believe it's still worth a listen even if you happen to live overseas. Now, as I always say, whenever we are discussing any sort of government action, we need to play it out. And this is simply going and looking at what this would actually entail. If we had the government deem loot boxes within video games as gambling, what would that actually mean for the industry? What would that mean for these games that already hold it? Would this impact future games and titles? Would it actually have a positive impact, or would it actually do more harm than it would good? So first things first, we need to establish what is the legal definition of gambling in the United States of America. So if we were to get Congress to deem loot boxes as gambling, what would they need in order to deem it that? And would they need to alter the definition entirely in order to make these loot boxes fit within that purview? Now, legally speaking, a person engages in gambling if he or she stakes or risks something of value upon the outcome of a contest of chance or a future contingent event not under their control or influence upon an agreement or understanding that he or she or someone else will receive something of value in the event of a certain outcome. Now, I know that's a mouthful, but essentially it means that you are gambling if you bet something of value to you or to someone else, just something of value, upon an event or some sort of contest or contingent event, something that could go either which way, that is not under your control, and then you might benefit off of it. It's a very legalese term, but that's what it is. Now, under this definition, as it is defined in US law, loot boxes would not fit within it. This actually only really works with casino gambling, where you might not actually benefit off of a particular bet or engagement. In the case of Battlefront 2, for instance, if you buy a loot box, you are guaranteed to get 3 cards. You don't know what those 3 cards are going to be, but you're guaranteed something of value no matter what the outcome is. You are going to effectively benefit from that exchange. Now, you might not benefit a lot, you might get duplicate cards, but you would ultimately benefit because you would be able to use those for crafting points, etc., blah, blah, blah. The same goes with Shadow of War. These loot boxes would not constitute modern gambling definitions because you are guaranteed a positive outcome no matter what you bet, or in this case, purchase. You are going to get something positive. Now, what would actually constitute as gambling under the current definition in US law would be if you put down, for instance, $5 for a chance at getting some sort of legendary orc, for instance, in Shadow of War. So you put down $5, and the more money you put down, the higher your odds are of getting one of these orcs. So say there's a 10% chance that you get it for each dollar that you put in the pot. So you put down $1, you get basically a dice roll, 1 in 10, and if you don't get that 10% chance shot, then you don't get anything at all. That is gambling under US law. But when you are guaranteed to get an orc, it just might not be the one you want. That doesn't constitute legal gambling. But I want to be clear, this doesn't mean that loot boxes could not possibly be deemed gambling. They certainly could. The definition would just have to be shifted under the court system or through Congress legislatively in order to allow these types of activities to be deemed gambling. However, that would have many other impacts, and this is where we play it through. So let's say that Congress goes through and deems loot boxes as gambling. They tweak the definition under the law such that gambling can be applied to loot boxes. If they did this, then all of a sudden Magic the Gathering cards, Hearthstone packs, all of these baseball trading card games, all of those would be deemed gambling because you'd be buying a pack of cards, but you are not guaranteed exactly what you might want. It becomes very, very fugazi once you get into that whole discussion because you aren't just dealing with strict gambling. Now you're dealing with simply purchasing an item but not being totally aware of what's inside or what the exact product is going to be. It gets incredibly vague, and so all of those games would have to start being regulated. Now, in the case of Magic the Gathering, this could single-handedly destroy the game, or at least redo and reinvent the way that they distribute cards to the point where it would eventually end up being a single item market where you go through and you see a card you want and there's a price for that individual card. You buy that individual card and that's that. There's none of this buying packs with a chance of getting a legendary or a foil card. You get what you get. That's it. But furthermore, sticking strictly to video games, with regards to video games, all of these games that currently include these loot boxes would need to be patched, or they would retroactively, or if they were coming out in the future, they would be deemed adults only. Depending on the state, it might even get a rating of 21 plus, because based on the state you are within, the legal gambling age can change between 18 and 21. In the state I currently live in, for instance, the legal gambling age is 21, as is the drinking age, and so in order to purchase and participate in these games, you would likely need to prove that you were at least 21 years old. Now, to be fair, because most of these loot box programs are within the multiplayer elements of their respective titles, it is possible that you would be able to purchase these games if you were not able to prove that you were of legal gambling age, but you simply wouldn't gain access to that particular market function or the ability to purchase those said loot boxes until you were able to prove your age. Nonetheless, it would get very, very complicated very, very quickly. And so, depending on how they approach this rating scheme, if they deem it as an optional sort of market transaction that you can have access to if you're able to prove your age, it's possible they could still rate their games the way they currently rate them, as T for teen or M for mature, keeping it like that, in which case most retailers would continue to carry those titles without any issues. However, if the ESRB changed their policy and decided decided to rate these games as adults only because they contain elements that are only available to adults, then all of a sudden all of these retailers who actively have policies where they do not carry or sell adult-only games, they would stop carrying these titles, meaning that you would have to purchase them online. And if this were the case, then whenever you would order these titles online, you would have to provide your proof of age based on your individual state to the seller, or you would risk legal punishments and repercussions. So this would mean that you would have to prove your age on your Steam account in a legal sense with a driver's license or something along those lines, because you aren't just dealing with a recommendation, you're dealing with something being illegal to participate in if you are not of the correct age. It wouldn't be an optional thing. You would need to prove your age. Now, as I said previously, there are a couple ways this could go, and they could simply do this through your Steam or Xbox Live account, where you prove your age through those accounts, and then that's pulled back down into the game to determine whether or not you can participate in these activities. But all of this gets incredibly complicated, especially in a legal sense, once you throw this in. Now, all of this also does not even take into consideration the fact that interstate gambling is pretty much outright illegal in the United States of America, especially online. And if the game's developer was headquartered in a different state or country for that matter, then you happen to be in, then the game's online loot boxes might be outright illegal to participate in to begin with, depending on how the laws are written up. Now, I know what you're saying, and I know what you've probably been saying for the last 5 minutes is, so what? This will force the developers to stop using loot boxes, which is the entire friggin' point. It would get so complicated and convoluted that game developers would simply say, oh, screw that. We're not going and jumping through all those hoops just for loot boxes. We're going to keep it simple. All they're going to do is pull back and go back to what they initially were doing, because assuming that this would cure the ill of loot boxes, that assumes that loot boxes are the ultimate evil and that publishers and developers currently employing these business tactics would just roll over and stop pursuing increased revenue. They'll simply charge you for virtual currencies. That way, when you're paying, you get a product that you know exactly what you're getting. There's no gambling involved in that, even under our new faux definition. And then you will have gotten the government involved in your hobby for absolutely no reason, and we are exactly back where we began. Now, I know all of that was incredibly complicated and very convoluted and strictly hypothetical, but the point is that even if you were to get this transaction of loot boxes deemed to be gambling, it wouldn't actually fix the problem, because they would say, okay, loot boxes are gambling. We're just going to go back and start charging you for virtual currencies, which will not fit under the definition of gambling, because you are getting a product based on what you paid for. You know exactly what you're getting when you pay for that product. You're not risking anything. There's no chance involved. If you pay for 10,000 credits, you're going to get 10,000 credits. There's no element of mystery or chance or luck involved in it. So at that point, you just got the government very heavily involved in regulating your hobby, and you have gotten nowhere. All of this to say, there is a much simpler solution to all of this, and it's something we are already employing. And that's very simple. Public outcry. When Battlefront 2 showed off their loot boxes during the beta this past week, it pissed off so many people and it got the internet so offended that EA actually had to come out and say, yeah, we messed up. We're sorry. We're going to rebalance stuff. It's still going to be there, but we're going to need to do some tinkering with it. If we continue to express our outrage when companies like this do something incredibly stupid like this, they will realize it's not worth it. These gaming companies live off of the support of their fans, the financial support of their fans. And the day that their fans become so frustrated with them that they simply stop financially supporting them because they're so frustrated with their business practices is the day that they lose. And so once the public outcry becomes so intense that they feel they have to respond in a new way, a new direction for their company, that's the day that we win. And that is a much better alternative than getting the government involved. And I get it, I really do. The desire to fix this issue is strong, but it's not going to be fixed by getting the government involved or people to come in and start telling people to do this and do that. Because these companies ultimately are doing this because they are trying to increase revenue to make up for new expenses with massive online servers, huge player bases, and increased cost and expenses while developing these games outright. And so getting one element of this banned wouldn't actually solve anything because they'd simply look for another way to do it. Instead, we need to look at why these companies are implementing loot boxes and understand that it's probably not purely greed. While some companies are certainly doing it for greedy reasons, a lot of it is being done simply because these games have gotten more and more expensive to produce, and they're trying to find a way to make up that margin without increasing the initial price of the game. Games have cost $60 for a long time, and when you can charge $60 for ARMS on your Nintendo Switch and also charge $60 for The Witcher 3, two games that cost vastly different amounts to produce, that's a day when we have to reevaluate how we're pricing these things out. It may be the case that the solution to this is as simple as raising the initial price of a lot of these games from $60 up to $70 or even $80. On average, that might actually make up enough revenue differential to actually balance this out and justify the removal of these loot boxes outright. And I know that's assuming a lot of goodwill on the part of the developer and specifically the publisher, but at this point I think that's probably a better option than getting the government involved in the thing that we happen to love so dearly, that being gaming. But at the end of the day, this is just my opinion, and I would love to hear yours. So if you have any thoughts on this topic, I'd love to hear them down below in the comment section or on Twitter or the Discord, all of which is linked down below. But that's all I have to say. Thank you for watching. I love you all, and I'll see you in the next video. Peace out.